heard the woman screaming and then a pop pop, and it was totally silent. I called.
On the morning of October 4th, 2007, a pregnant woman lay bleeding across the floor of her Chicago apartment. She had been shot 7 times. Prosecutors would later say the attack was no accident and no crime of opportunity. Several of those bullets were fired into her abdomen. When police entered the apartment, they found 42-year-old Rhoni Reuter beyond saving. Doctors fought to rescue her baby through an emergency delivery, but the little boy survived only briefly before dying from his injuries. In just a few minutes, a mother and her child were gone. As detectives searched for answers, one detail immediately drew national attention. Rhoni Reuter wasn't just an expectant mother. She was carrying the baby of former NFL star Sean Gale, and in only a few weeks the two were expecting to welcome their son into the world. Rhoni Reuter had spent most of her life away from the spotlight. Friends described her as kind, intelligent, and deeply devoted to the people she loved. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, built a successful career, and was known for being dependable and thoughtful. Nothing about her life suggested she would one day become the center of one of Chicago's most disturbing murder cases. In 2007, she was preparing for a new chapter. At 42 years old, Rhoni was expecting her first child, a baby boy. Her pregnancy had progressed into its 8th month, and she was only a few weeks away from giving birth. Family members later said she was excited about becoming a mother and was looking forward to meeting her son. The baby's father was former Chicago Bears defensive back Sean Gale. The two had been in a relationship, although they did not live together. Despite that, Sean acknowledged that he was the father of the baby, and Rhoni was making plans for the future with her child on the way. To everyone who knew her, life seemed to be moving forward. She continued working, kept in close contact with her family, and was preparing for the arrival of her son. There were no public signs that she believed she was in immediate danger. According to prosecutors, while she was counting down the days until her son's birth, another woman had become consumed by jealousy over Sean Gale. On the morning of October 4th, 2007, Rhoni was at home in her apartment in Deerfield, Illinois. She was 42 years old and more than 8 months pregnant. Her son was expected to be born later that month. According to the evidence presented at trial, the woman who came to her door was wearing a dark wig and a disguise. Rhoni had no reason to think she was about to be attacked. Moments after the door opened, gunfire erupted inside the apartment. Rhoni was shot 7 times. Testimony showed that several of the bullets struck her abdomen. The attack happened at extremely close range. She collapsed onto the floor of her living room with devastating injuries. Neighbors heard the gunshots and called 911. Paramedics rushed Rhoni to the hospital, where doctors performed an emergency cesarean section in a desperate attempt to save her baby. Her son, whom she had planned to name Matthew, was delivered alive but had suffered catastrophic injuries. Despite every effort to save him, he died shortly afterward. Rhoni never regained consciousness. The apartment told a chilling story. Nothing of value had been taken. There were no signs that someone had searched through her belongings. It was clear that the person who walked through that door had come for only one reason. For Rhoni's family, the loss was almost impossible to comprehend. Just hours earlier, they had been counting down the days until a new baby would arrive. Instead, they were preparing 2 funerals. The person responsible had disappeared before police reached the apartment, leaving behind very few clues. For a while, the truth remained hidden. Then, years later, one conversation would bring the entire case back to life. For nearly 2 years, Rhoni's family waited for answers. The person who had walked into her apartment and taken 2 lives had vanished without leaving behind an obvious trail. The case remained unsolved, and those closest to Rhoni could only hope that one day someone would make a mistake. That moment finally came in 2009. A woman who knew Rhoni Reuter agreed to secretly record their conversations while wearing a hidden recording device. During those conversations, Rhoni made statements that would later become some of the most important evidence presented in court. According to the recordings played for the jury, Rhoni spoke about disguising herself before the shooting. She described wearing a dark wig and changing her appearance so she would not be recognized. She also made statements about using a bicycle after the attack to leave the area without attracting attention. Those recordings became the turning point in the case. Rhoni Reuter was arrested in March 2011 and charged with the murders of Rhoni Reuter and her unborn son. She pleaded not guilty, and the case moved toward trial. When the trial began, jurors heard not only the recorded conversations but also testimony describing years of jealousy over Sean Gale. The prosecution argued that Rhoni had been targeted simply because she was carrying his child. The defense challenged the recordings and denied that Rhoni was responsible for the killings. After hearing weeks of testimony, the jury found Rhoni Reuter guilty of first-degree murder for Rhoni's death and intentional homicide of her unborn child. In 2013, she was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. For Rhoni's family, the verdict brought accountability, but it could never restore what had been taken. A mother who had been only weeks away from holding her son was gone, and the little boy whose heartbeat had filled her final months never had the chance to grow up. Nearly 2 decades later, the case is still remembered as one of the most heartbreaking crimes driven by jealousy, a future erased before it could even begin. The verdict closed the courtroom case, but it never closed the questions people continued to ask about Rhoni Reuter's life. For many, the hardest part of the story was not simply how she died, but how close she had been to becoming a mother. Her due date was only weeks away. Friends and family had been preparing to welcome a new baby into the world. Instead, they found themselves planning a funeral for a mother and the son she never got the chance to hold. One detail from the case has continued to disturb people for years. During the trial, prosecutors argued that several of the gunshots struck Rhoni's abdomen. They said this showed the attack was intended not only to kill Rhoni, but also to ensure that her unborn baby would not survive. That allegation became one of the most haunting parts of the entire case and remains one of the reasons it is remembered so vividly today. Rhoni's son was delivered by emergency cesarean section after the shooting. Doctors did everything they could to save him, but his injuries were too severe. He died soon afterward. In just a few minutes, a future that Rhoni had spent months preparing for disappeared forever. The case also changed how many people looked at crimes involving pregnant women. Rhoni was not caught in a robbery or an argument that suddenly turned violent. According to the evidence accepted by the jury, she was targeted while expecting a child, making the loss even more devastating for those who followed the case. Years later, Rhoni's family continued speaking about the woman they knew before headlines reduced her to a victim. They remembered her as caring, hardworking, and excited about becoming a mother. Those who loved her wanted people to remember more than the crime scene. They wanted people to remember the life she had built and the future she believed was just around the corner. The apartment where everything happened eventually became just another home. The police tape disappeared. The news cameras left. The headlines faded. But for Rhoni's family, October 4th, 2007, never truly ended. Every birthday her son never celebrated and every milestone he never reached became another reminder of what had been stolen. Today, the murder of Rhoni Reuter is still discussed whenever people talk about crimes driven by jealousy and obsession. It remains one of the most heartbreaking cases involving an expectant mother in recent American history because it was not only the life of a woman that was taken. It was the life she was carrying, the future she had imagined, and the family she was only weeks away from beginning. Rhoni left for no special occasion that morning. She wasn't saying goodbye. She believed she still had time to prepare for her son's arrival. Instead, Her story ended inside her own apartment, only weeks before she was supposed to hear her baby cry for the first time. Nearly 20 years later, that silence still speaks louder than anything else. It is the silence of a nursery that was never filled, a mother who never came home, and a little boy whose life ended before it had the chance to begin. As detectives reconstructed Rhoni Reuter's final months, one name kept appearing in their investigation: Marnie Young. Marnie had been involved in an on-and-off relationship with Sean Gale for years. According to prosecutors, she believed the relationship was far more serious than it really was, and became increasingly upset whenever she learned he was seeing other women. Later alleged that Rhoni became the focus of that anger after Marnie learned she was pregnant. Court testimony described a pattern of anonymous phone calls and efforts to gather information about Rhoni's life. The investigation also uncovered allegations that Marnie used false identities while contacting people connected to Sean Gale. Witnesses testified that she sometimes pretended to be someone else to obtain information, making it difficult for those receiving the calls to know who they were really speaking to.